Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it every Monday, giving you 3 short stories, 1 big story, and wins and losses. I'm with my outstanding co-host, Ann Zadeh. What's going on? How are you doing?
I guess now I'm under the pressure to be outstanding today. I'm doing okay.
I love it. Well,
it's been a busy week.
Yes, it has. And so a little bit of update here. We are going to give you some news on the upcoming elections locally, as there was some discussions around will Mayor Mattie Parker run again? We're going to hit, obviously, we have some Tim O'Hare news. We have some Bill Wayborn news. We also have news about Fort Worth updating and increasing its taxes, and what does that mean really for our city. So a lot to cover. Next week we're going to be out, but we'll have a awesome interview that we're looking for you to enjoy while we're out, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. But let's go ahead and hit short story number 1.
So short story number 1 is a Fort Worth Star-Telegram article entitled Tarrant County Judge Scripted TAD Agenda Items. Attorney questions whether it's legal. And this is chock full of things that made me go, what? So basically it starts off by saying that Tarrant County Judge Tim O'Hare wrote the agenda items that resulted in changes to the Tarrant Appraisal District's property reappraisal plan, according to an email that the Star-Telegram obtained through an open records request. This email was sent on July 17th to the newly elected TAD board member, Matt Bryant, telling fellow elected members, Callie Rigney, please consider revising the agenda item to what Tim O scripted below. I like what Tim D put together, but feel we should resubmit what Tim O came up with, and we need to add the freeze, quote unquote, agenda item. So basically, it seems like Tim O'Hare, the county judge, is having a say about how things are written on the agenda of the elected TAD board, which seems concerning to start with. They interviewed some tax attorneys and said that those actions could run afoul of state property tax code, a law that makes certain that communication by members of governing bodies for the purpose of influencing value of property appraisals is a misdemeanor offense.
Yeah, I mean, this makes a lot of sense. I mean, Tim O'Hare should not be writing up an agenda items that he'll be voting upon. I mean,
and I think he's communicating with those 3 board members that he endorsed in the last election. So those newly elected members that he endorsed are the people he's communicating with, and none of them are the chair of this body. And in most things, they're the chair and a staff person. At least this is how the city works, and I think the county as well. So it's just interesting to have regular members scripting. I think regular members in all of these can have a say in things and can put things on the agenda, but reaching out to him to have him, or maybe he reached out to them. I don't know who initiated this communication.
I mean, when you look at the TAD policies manual, O'Hare's involvement in setting the TAD board agenda is not in line with it. So it calls for the board chair, Vince Puente, which you mentioned, the chair, to establish meeting agendas with assistance from the chief appraiser. But this makes sense why things move so fast when they were able to get their 2-year exempt set up, get their 5% cap on residential values. Those things were able to happen because of this. And I think it's interesting to see that he was also using personal emails, right? So that means like the same thing that they complained about with Hillary Clinton using personal emails. It seems like Tim O'Hare didn't learn anything about it because they called that shadiness. And so you just might have to use that same perspective if that's what made you so terrified of Hillary in 2016.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of not responding to requests for comment. There are some folks on speaking on Tim O'Hare's behalf saying that they believe that there was not a violation and that this is, saying something that's disparaging of his character, that it's not illegal what he did. So the Star-Telegram went on to interview several attorneys and wrote about their credentials and how they're on lists of being well thought of, who did kind of agree with the fact that they thought that this was probably not proper. I think they reached out to Councilmember Blaylock, who is also on that board, and he said he generally does not comment on discussions to which he was not a party, but added that it is not clear to him that the interpretation and the application of the statute is correct in this instance. But when they asked him to speak further on something else, he went back to citing his general rule of not commenting on communication of others.
Yeah. And the appointed TAD board member, Rich DeOtte, said in an email statement he was unaware of Brian's email. But he said, this was interesting, quote, every taxing entity in the state would probably be in violation of the law if it means they can't try to influence policy. And to me, that's, I guess, they're looking at it in the wrong way, because we're not talking about that you can't influence policy in the correct way. It's being in the background, using your personal emails and talking to the 3 people you endorsed, and then setting the agenda. That part of influence policy is a legal way of influencing policy. And so I think a lot of these O'Hare supporters on this, again, I just think are trying to allow a lot of control, which, I mean, I don't know if you're ready to kind of go into kind of the next story of the appraisal court blocks Tarrant GOP from filing contested precinct chair position. There's a lot of controlling basically in this Tarrant County Republican Party, led by O'Hare and Beau French, and people who want a lot of control. And can you tell us what kind of happened in Tarrant County's precinct 4230 chair position?
This is a little bit different from the first article we talked about, but it is, to your point, about ways that people are trying to control things. So apparently there was a election where a precinct chair was elected with 75% of the vote, but the head of the GOP felt like that person was not truly a Republican to fill a Republican precinct chair seat and refused to issue a certificate that would allow him to be the elected precinct chair. And so he went to court to contest that because he had run and won. And I don't know what the rules are, because you don't register as a Republican or a Democrat in the state of Texas. You might have a record of voting in primaries that reflects kind of where you are, but there's no official registration. So if you're going to be a precinct chair, you typically are working with the party in which you're wanting to be the precinct chair for, and you're a part of all of that. So I'm not sure how this person, if he is indeed not a Republican, and I don't know, they're accusing him of that, but
yeah, and what can this person possibly do wrong by being a Democrat in this position? It sounds
so
like
there's Democrat precinct chairs and there's Republican precinct chairs, and not all those seats are filled. So both parties, I think, struggle sometimes to get all of those seats filled. They are just basically advocates in that precinct to try to get out the vote. So if you had someone who was not a Republican in the Republican seat, they might not be working too hard to get Republicans out to vote. So I would think that might be their objection to that. Truly, you should be of the party that you're filling the precinct chair. Again, I don't know if this gentleman is or not, but he got through the whole process to run and win with 75% of the vote. So if there was a question about whether he was eligible in the eyes of the GOP, they probably should have recognized that prior to having him on the ballot and getting 75% of the vote.
And it sounds like the people who run for something like this would really be bipartisan and more about voting, and they just believe all people should vote.
I don't.
No.
No.
You
I
don't think so?
No, I think that they are
very
I mean, I
aggressive.
think they believe that too. But I have my Democratic precinct chair is definitely partisan. I mean, he is out there advocating for folks to vote on the Democratic side in elections that are.
So I can see then how this sweats them, because they don't think this person will do a good job for their narrative.
Right. And I don't know what the process is of how you vet someone to run for these roles. I don't think it's a high turnout election. I don't even ever remember voting for mine. He's just been there for a really long time. So I'm not sure. But again, you got to stay on top of these things. Yeah. I know that the Democratic Party chair has spoken about how and I know people who are working to make sure that those precinct chair positions on the Democratic side are filled, because there's some that have remained unfilled for longer periods of time. And I think that's what kind of leads to voter apathy and people not being aware of when elections are coming up and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so it seems like short story number one for you guys is it's going to be around moves that the GOP is making to have control. Number one was the TAD appraisal board with Tim O'Hare literally writing the agenda for something he has to vote for. Shady right there. Then you have Beau French saying that we cannot have a person who won the precinct chair position by 75% of the vote, saying he is not Republican enough and is now trying to stop this person from taking that seat. The next person who's obviously seeking control is Sheriff Bill Waybourne. So what we also wanted to address last week, we spent a lot of time talking about him not attending meetings when county commissioners were asking for meetings for more follow-up. You saw both Elisa Simmons and Manny Ramirez both being like, hey, I feel like this is not right. Yet he is showing up to the Texas True Project event, which is an ultra-right extreme group who talks about a lot of things like replacement theory of America's trying to, the American left is trying to get rid of white men. Bill Waybourne was there, but he wasn't there for the county commissioner. So all of that was happening. We recorded Wednesday. We dropped Monday. On Thursday, records obtained by the Fort Worth Report and KERA show a lieutenant drafted more than 450 pages of general orders at the request of command staff in 2021, but they were never implemented. The draft was intended to provide overarching guidelines for all employees, which do not currently exist. Staff rely on policies specific to their individual divisions. So on top of wanting to know more information about how the jail is ran, there was already an internal review of recommendations that need to happen to make things more synergistic and aligned. And it looks like all those recommendations wasn't even taken seriously.
Just sat on a shelf.
Yep, and just sat on a shelf. At least 65 people have died within Tarrant County custody since Waybourne took office in 2017. This is kind of the situation that we're in, but I just wanted to bring that up as well because we missed this article when we recorded early. So those are three examples of short story number one being about who you vote in and how they work with others matter. And currently, this group believes that they have an idea of what needs to happen for Texas, and they're doing all that they can to not listen to anyone else and make sure that they make a Texas that looks like how they want it to look like. So we don't stop here with the Tarrant GOP. The next part is, if you remember, I think 2 stories ago we talked about DEI and we talked about how I think Fort Worth and me and you were talking about off mic. It feels like there's a lot of drama in Fort Worth and the county and how we talk to each other and about each other. And it looks like the Republican Party has that Tarrant GOP energy, which is very extreme, has an agenda, wants a lot of control. But then you have kind of this moderate legacy Republicans, which are from Fort Worth usually, and these are the groups that you can say, right? We talk about Betsy, Michael Crane, Mattie Parker, that kind of crew, and they're kind of yin and yanging between how far do they go over and meet the needs of the O'Hares and the Beau Frenches. But then you've also seen the Beau Frenches attack Mattie Parker for little minor things, and that's kind of where we're back because the story was Fort Worth has to stand up on being moderate, being a centrist city that actually talks to one another and figure out what the middle is about. And so I can say me, is afraid that because the Tarrant County leadership is stronger and more bold and more mean, this playing nice that city Fort Worth is used to is no longer going to work. And you see that as Tarrant County judges and conservative activists went directly to a TCU professor and calling for her to be fired over her anarchist rhetoric. You read this story. What do you kind of see and give the people who are listening?
This has happened a number of times where they've just kind of focused in on an individual person and put up in their social media pictures of that person and just put out if we're talking about rhetoric, language that is really deflammatory and negative and scary, making these people feel fearful. But this is a story about a Texas Christian University professor who is an English instructor, and she's come under fire by some folks on their social media because she often writes about things that they are fired up about, like anarchism and anti-racism and white supremacy and Christian nationalism, which we have talked about multiple times on this pod.
Seems like a great guest for the pod.
Yeah. So they're basically saying that TCU should fire her, which, it's a private institution, and typically universities allow their professors free speech. And when you're teaching people, you talk about all kinds of things. And I don't think that they should be limited and controlled by politicians. But Tarrant County's Judge Tim O'Hare and County Commissioner Manny Ramirez and conservative activists across the county are criticizing her for her stances on police funding and regulation, and several of them are calling for her to be fired. The university didn't answer the question about whether administrators are considering terminating her or disciplining her. They basically stated that professors within our community often express expertise and opinions that are specific to them and don't necessarily align with the overall position of the university on any given issue.
Yeah, and so to kind of, give you kind of the press here is like, it's confusing because they don't want you to have the freedom to think or the freedom to be challenged or the freedom to bring all ideas to the table. And so now, because universities are really one of those one-stop shops that allow people to hear all parts of ideas and thoughts. And that's why universities are so important, is because it gets us out of our reality and how we were raised, and oftentimes raised based off of the boundaries of our parents and our communities and how we saw the world locally. Universities, that one melting pot that allows us to get diverse viewpoints and to have different professors with different mindsets, right? And so they're taking this and saying, hey, that's not acceptable. And what do? They get True Texas Project, which we always talk about, the Libs of TikTok, which is a 3.3 million X social media platform. They get the Texas National Network, all to attack this professor. And so it was a full-on effort, and I think what you oftentimes see, and I think this is where the centrist classic Republican of Fort Worth maybe gets worked up about us addressing and talking about these things, is that they see this just as noise, and these are what these viral social media groups do in order to still make noise, because they know that these things click. But it doesn't really matter in the real life. Like, how much power do these people have? How much influence does this really look? Who's actually asking for this? But it was enough people to get in front of the TCU's leadership and write a letter about it and say that it's against the handbook. So I just think, like, what happens if these things happening at TCU where, because you have this professor, get removed? Those are the scary parts that we were also fearing when we were talking about removing DEI from the city.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a chilling effect on speech, basically. It's like they're very active in saying that they don't want their free speech to be limited, but they're very active limiting other people's free speech when they say things that they disagree with. And, I think that universities should be a place where all topics can be discussed in detail and people can research things and learn things, and, all these things can be discussed. I don't think that it necessarily influences someone to change their mind. You're not going to make somebody be another way because they heard about it in a college classroom. These people seem to think college professors have all this power and ability, and I think that, people learn and then know better.
Yeah. And so those are kind of our topics. Number one was right to control. Number two is the infiltration into the city, taking this rhetoric and trying to influence how our city institutions operate. And so if you're a Fort Worthian who's proud to be a Fort Worthian, but then also obviously you live in Tarrant County, you need to be active, constantly thinking, listening, and defending the purple city that we are. And I'm not just talking about being a TCU colors. I'm talking about the political landscape of our city. And regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican, this is something that feels bipartisan, right? We all agreed of bringing ideas together, having dignity, having a conversation. And there's actually, I sent this to you, a dignity index. And Timothy Shriver, who started the Special Olympics, actually one of his new nonprofits is called the Dignity Index. And it's about teaching people to take the dignity pledge and how to talk across a scale, and it allows you to rank speech from being content and disrespectful to having dignity. And it's talking about how to use language where you're not attacking the idea. No, you're not attacking the person. You're attacking the idea. And I think what they're doing here is attacking the person.
Exactly.
And I think that it doesn't take a lot of work for our leadership team to look into this dignity index, say, hey, we're going to be a city that commits to that. But I think that would be a great front runner because I haven't seen a lot of other cities do that yet. And that's just, that's a very new thing that I was pitched to when I was in a meeting. I got to see it in D.C. And so I thought, man, this is something that I think would really work in Fort Worth, especially at the time where our Tarrant GOP is trying to bully our moderates.
I think that's similar to the book that I showed you before we sat down today about dealing with toxicity within a city. And it's a book that somebody shared with me that I actually bought 2 copies of that I plan to send to our city, because I think you're exactly right. I think that a lot of this is just a really high ratcheted up negative discord and a lack of dignity about how we talk about these things with people that are on, have different opinions about how these things should be handled. I mean, you did mention something about, whether there was going to be discipline in this situation, and the university at this point is not doing any of that. They recognize and value fostering discourse and encourage free exchange of ideas, and they firmly support all of its community members expressing their views and protesting against actions and opinions that they disagree with. So they basically say that TCU is fully committed to free speech and the rights to say what they're committed to, and those principles should protect Edward's speech in this matter. So that's what the experts are saying, and hopefully that's where we go from here.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's talk about some real important stuff, and that is the taxes of the county and the city. That's both kind of going back and forth. So our third story is Fort Worth proposes tax increases as property values cool. Here's how they'll spend the money. We also will be looking at that was the Star Telegram one by Harrison Mantis. We will also be looking at the proposed Fort Worth budget would raise tax rate for the first time since 1995, which is Emily Wolf out of the Fort Worth report. So for the first time in 30 years, Fort Worth property tax rate could be going up. City staff are recommending raising the city's property tax rate from 62.25 cents per $100 of value to 67.73 cents per $100 value. The city hasn't raised its tax rate since 1995. The proposed rate is just below the no new revenue tax rate, which is the tax rate that would generate the same amount of revenue in 2025 from the properties that were on tax rolls in 2024. The city estimates that it will translate to a $60 increase for the average Fort Worth homeowner. The owner of a $3,000 home with a homestead exemption, the owner of a $300,000 home with a homestead exemption would pay $1,625.52 in city property taxes. This increased tax rate will bring an additional $9 million, which will almost exclusively go towards road maintenance. The money will be used in lieu of the proposed 9.2 monthly street fee that was scrapped in May over concerns about the cost to residents. You obviously know a lot here of this history of declining the tax rate. Your experience plus looking at what's being done here and at the county level, what do you have to say?
So the city early in 2013, 2014 timeframe and prior to that had the highest tax rate, I think, in the entire state of Texas. And that was a really bad title to carry. It caused a lot of folks to, not want to bring businesses here, all that kind of stuff. So at that time, the city started intentionally trying to lower the tax rate to get us below being the highest tax rate in the state. And they successfully did that after lowering the tax rate for the last, I think, 12 years with one little pause in the middle of COVID when they kept it the same. They didn't raise it. They just kept it the same and did not lower it for that year. My experience is that we have gotten ourselves way below being the highest. I mean, we were like 80 something when this all started, and now we're 60 something. And so we're definitely way below being the highest in the state. And I started to have some concerns that we were not being able to deliver some of the things. And this example of street maintenance is one of those things. I was looking at things like transportation and wanting to more highly fund public transportation. And back in 2017, I suggested that we not lower it a whole 3 cents or 4 cents and do one of those pennies to go towards public transportation, which was something that we had never considered before. And I had a majority of council members on board for that. But then 2 of my colleagues decided they didn't even want to have a conversation about it and just didn't show up for the meeting, which broke a quorum, and we couldn't even have the conversation. So I was very upset about that, and I'm still bitter. But I think what we're finding here is that we have lowered and lowered and lowered. And in the meantime, we have not been able to maintain roads and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and
I'm looking at the city has over 8,000 miles of street surface and nearly 5,000 miles are in need of maintenance or reconstruction.
And then the paragraph says the money will allow the city to maintain 33 miles of roads instead of replacing it at an estimated cost of $500 million, says the Transportation and Public Works Department. Do you know how many miles of roads Transportation Public Works has to take care of? And this is going to allow just 33 miles. Yeah. I think our sprawling development, which I constantly go back to, is what has gotten us into this position of having so many roads that we have to maintain. So there's a way we could fix this in that we could stop building so much sprawl and having so many new roads come on to needing to be maintained. But we find ourselves where we are now, and they are looking at property values that are kind of slowing down. And so we're growing, and maintaining our budget on all of that growth without thinking about the fact that if that growth doesn't continue, then we are not having that money to maintain the stuff that already exists, let alone anything new that has been built. So as everybody keeps saying, growth should pay for growth. Well, it clearly doesn't. Yeah. And so now we find ourselves in this position where they are planning to not fill positions that have been unfilled. And there was a proposal to possibly raise the minimum wage, which our minimum wage is lower than many other cities. And that makes it more challenging and difficult to compete with other cities for folks to come and work for the city of Fort Worth. Ours is at $15.75 an hour. And they're only proposing to raise it to $16.07. And several council members have asked and are pushing for it to be raised to $20 per hour, which would be a small step in making the folks that work for the city of Fort Worth actually able to afford to live in the city of Fort Worth, because we are not approaching that livable wage at the current rate or the proposed rate in this budget. But this is just the very beginning of the budget discussion, and they'll be discussing it over the next month or so, and they'll vote on it in September. But the first article, like you mentioned, is a Star-Telegram article, and there's also a Fort Worth Report article. And David Cook goes on to say that the council members should focus on a theme of this budget, focusing on foundations, which is maintaining current infrastructure and ensuring public safety while limiting additions of new city staff positions. And I think I mentioned to you that what I share with people when they talk about and complain about whether the city is able to provide the things that they would like to see their city provide, that I think we haven't really staffed up to the levels that are necessary for a city of this size, going way back to 2008 when we had a recession and we tightened our belts and we cut staff, and we don't have staff to be like proactive and do all the things that we're now trying to do with a comprehensive plan update and a master thoroughfare plan and a move a million and all these things that we're trying to do with a very bare bones staff and with a lot of really, really new people. And so I just think that this is going to cause that to be an even more challenging thing to do. And when we talk about just going back to focusing on foundations, what that says to me is core governmental services. And what that says to me is cutting out things like the arts and, all of those things that I think help with the, parkland, open space, all those things that lead to quality of life issues. If we're just going to be providing streets, water, public safety, and not having all those other things, those are going to be the first things to be cut. And at the end of this article, it talks about the fact that we have focused on neighborhoods that have been ignored in the past, and we have done these neighborhood improvement zones. And when they talk about the things that might be the first to be nixed, if we have to tighten our belts, that's one of the things that they said, that in the past we did one neighborhood a year and now we're doing two. But if we're tightening the budget, we may have to go back to doing one. And so then we're back to a position of not making up for all of the things that we haven't been able to maintain and improve in neighborhoods that have been left behind in the past. And that, I think, would be really unfortunate.
Can you talk to me and walk me through, how much do you see this being, we also see that, right, Tarrant County is planning to another tax cut. And you saw in Star Telegram by Noah Akala Bach, which is no longer at the Star Telegram, but he wrote a piece about how Commissioner Brooks is talking about how, the commissioners did approve the recommended budget, but he's very concerned about the county's ability to do its work while keep lowering its taxes. What can you tell us about Commissioner Brooks's concerns, what's happening at the county, and is it directly impacting the city, and are we reacting to that, or what's the, I guess, seesaw back and forth when?
Well, I think that Commissioner Brooks is definitely signaling something that maybe we should have signaled a couple of years ago as we continued to lower that tax rate. I think as elected officials, taxes seem to be something that you hear about from constituents a lot. And people definitely don't like taxes. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want their taxes to go up. So elected officials want to respond to their constituents by saying, I have lowered your tax rate. We still get complaints because people's values were going up. And so their actual tax bill was not being lowered by that rate going down, but it kept it from going up as much as it would have. But in the meantime, I think people don't realize that how a city and a county deliver services is through taxes. That's the main part of the budget for those people. So if you insist on them lowering the tax rate and then insist on services that are above and beyond what can be paid for with the rate, then you're going to be disappointed in what can be provided. So I think that Commissioner Brooks, even though he's not running again, so he's not going to be stuck with this situation, he is signaling and saying, look, people, you can continue to cut this tax rate and feel good in the moment, but you're going to get to a point where you're not going to be able to deliver the services that are necessary to run the county or, the city, if we'd signaled that a couple of years ago. And then you're going to have to raise taxes, which is a super harder place to be as an elected official than just saying we can't cut the rate this year because we need to have this funding in order to deliver the services that are demanded by the citizenry.
So hearing you talk and you breaking it down, both the county and the city, my mind goes back to this, Fort Worth used to be the highest tax space, the county or city. But I actually think that makes a lot of sense of why we actually should be the number one city with the most taxes in Texas, because our city limits is so damn big. So we are creating multiple cities. It would right? Dallas gets to stop at Dallas. Then Addison and Plano are new cities. Plano, at the same distance from Dallas, is still called Fort Worth over here in Tarrant County. And so to me, we have to continue to build. We're building new suburbs. We're building our own Addison, our own Planos, our own Richardsons. And so, because we choose to have the city limits the way they are, we have to have a higher tax rate because we're growing out very far. Then we need to build those roads. We need to do all those things. and we're needing to compete and make those spaces on their own, like the Alliance area, competitive to the Planos, competitive to the Colony, whatever the other things are around that area, because that's still Fort Worth for a lot of our spaces. And so it just, to me, makes sense to have that. My other question or thought to you is around, I saw in the Dallas Morning News a couple weeks ago, they did a 2023 audit on Dallas housing inventory. The city's auditor's office estimated that the city added roughly 56,000 apartments between 2016 and 2022, while the number of single-family homes fell by 5,600 during that same period. So, like, I also believe the issue, you have the Republicans saying, hey, I want to lower my property taxes, and that shows me I'm being a good politician, right? You having the progressives or us saying, hey, we got a fast-growing city, a big city. We need to make this a place where we could work, live, and play and compete with other spaces. And because the size of our city limits, we actually have to invest more than most people because we have more land to develop. But I genuinely believe the true argument is these real estate companies are no longer building homes that people can own. And because back in the day, like, you as a real estate investor, you make more money if you can just create everyone as renters. And so when you can create everyone as renters, you build these townhomes, these condos, these apartments, and therefore you're not even, what you are building aren't even building the things that these people are asking for, regardless if you believe we should have single family homes or more of those. But the fact that I'm imagining if Dallas is declining, I'm imagining Fort Worth isn't declining because we're growing, but we're surely probably creating a lot more apartments and renter spaces than ownership spaces. So it's like we're not even increasing our property taxes as well in that space because, like, what are we doing to those real estate companies who are choosing to put everyone in a renter situation? And, like, what are their taxes? Are their taxes getting raised? What's the corporate tax on those guys who are actually keeping, like, our suburbs all renters rather than owners? And I think that could be hurtful.
I would have to go look up the numbers in order to decide whether I agree with you or not, because I think that there is a lot of single family being built in Fort Worth because that sprawl you're talking about, for the most part, is single family. Some of it denser than others, because almost every zoning case that I saw was existing single family homes on larger lots objecting to single family homes being built on smaller lots because they felt like that would decrease the value of their property. So I am one who believes that there should be a spectrum of housing available at different price points and in the appropriate locations. So condos are usually ownership, so there is an ownership opportunity in condos. Townhouses as well. They can be rental as well. Apartments are definitely rental property. And I know that the city does keep track of the number of building permits in all those spaces and the amounts that are in each one and in what in the districts and how many renters there are and how much home ownership there is. And I've been surprised to find more home ownership in some of the districts that maybe people would think that wasn't the case. So I think that, and then I would have to also research how the taxing works on those, because I think that there is taxing that happens on a commercial product like an apartment that is different than single family homes. And we're trying to get more of those tax dollars so it's not on the individual homeowner. The renter then is negatively impacted because the owner of those apartments doesn't necessarily pass on the savings. So if there is a reduction in the tax rate that helps them as the business owner of that apartment complex, do they pass that on to the renter by lowering the rent? It's similar to cities not cutting back. I think that the likelihood is that they're not going to cut back on that rent because that just allows them to make more money.
But yeah, and that's, I mean, this audit from Dallas, I mean, the 56,000 apartments between 2016 and 2022, while the number of single family homes in the same period was 5,600, fell by 5,600. I'm just saying, like, I also go out to Buc-ee's or those areas, and there's a lot of random big odd apartments set up. And I know this is probably where I will always maybe be my moderate Texas kid of me. It's like, I never meet anyone who wants to live in an apartment. I've never met someone who says, you know what I want to do is live in an apartment. I have never met someone who says that. But there's people who want homes, who want ownership. And I think in order the way Texas will ever have to be able to do the things that we see places on the coast do is we got to make it look like, what does it look like in a way where people can still flock to Texas or be Texas for the reasons that they come. And I'm not saying mansions, but I'm saying home ownership, and how do we create the urban village style, the walkable, the transit, while still being why people enjoyably like Texas compared to the other denser places of the world. And I'm just saying that in a lens of actually getting things done and making this more bipartisan and happening in our metroplex.
So when you say you've never met somebody who wants to live in an apartment,
Besides a college kid.
Are you meaning that because they can't own it or because of the space itself? Because I will tell you that the last couple of tours that I went on of apartments that were built in Fort Worth, like Deco 969 downtown,
Yep.
I have said, oh my God, I would love to live here because the amenities, the location, the finishes are
and that's like luxury.
Amazing.
Like luxury. Yeah, but I'm talking
that's what's being built right now.
But I'm not in
out
in
there.
Buc-ee's.
So
Not in Buc-ee's.
that's location.
Yeah.
I object to putting apartments, those mid-rise apartments, just out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I object to that as much as I object to single-family home neighborhoods being plopped down in the middle of nowhere. That is what leads to the demand for the services around those that then is very expensive.
What do you think if we walked up to 100 random Fort Worthians, how many of them would you say, I want a backyard? I would want my own private backyard. If we asked 100, how many you think says, yes, I want my own private backyard?
I have no idea. But I will tell you that we bought our house
85.
with a tiny, tiny little backyard and a tiny front yard across the street from a park in an more urban neighborhood because of wanting
But Ann is one of those 100.
I don't.
I think the Deco 6'9" people now brings it the other 8 of the 100, but it's still I see it as someone who I grew up in Texas. I grew up in small town Texas. I grew up in my mom's house was relatively big. We had a pool in the backyard. When I see I think people come to Texas for that experience and want that experience, and I think honestly Texas has the land to do so, but I think we still need a higher tax rate so that we can give everything that the denser places that don't have the privilege to give every person that Texas home idea. And I'm not saying big homes, but 1,400 square feet, 2,000 square feet, those ranges is possible for people, and I think that's ultimately what they want. I don't think people want to be renters. I never met someone who wants to be a renter unless they're going to a nice spot, getting one of those condos in Crescent or apartments by Crescent. But that's a different genre of people who are on the kind of the end curve, wanting to reduce.
I think the ownership thing is real, and I just would like to
and this
have
is not even
a
our big story, by
diverse
the way.
group of ownership. Say again.
This is not even our big story, but we're doing good.
Seriously.
But go ahead.
So, I think that being able to own something and have it be on, from the smaller townhouse condo all the way up to the houses you're talking about with land around them.
Yep.
But I have a friend who is like, everybody needs to get back to the land and make their own food and all that kind of stuff. But there's no way for the entire population to live like that.
Yeah.
So the answer is to have those choices across the board, because there are some people who want to live in neighborhoods. I mean, you and I live in urban neighborhoods.
Correct.
We live in neighborhoods that are closer to the core, that have all those amenities, and that street infrastructure is already there. And as we grow and have everybody show up in their cars, that lifestyle is going to become less nice. I mean, I'm going through it right now after the summer of having no students around, living near TCU, and then having all those students come back.
Oh, yeah.
I forget the difference. I have been living a very calm lifestyle over the summer of not having that additional
over the summer.
population.
Over the summer, Ann lives in Hazlitt, and during the school year, she lives in TCU. No, but no, I think it's just a fascinating. I think Texas has to build its own story of what it looks like, especially if Fort Worth's going to get on the same page about it. And that's just, and if you see, like, I'm also frustrated. It's easy for these real estate people to go out to this place with no land or no rules and like be able to do all this, and all the building and incentives is to build out there, and so that's what's creating the sprawl as well. Is the incentives need to be reversed.
Well, the land is cheaper. We have incentivized in the past developing,
but the rules
in that
are cheaper.
sprawly way.
But the community right now, you want to touch this building that's been here since 1945. Everyone and their grandma got something to say about this building. Let's talk about this building. What do we want this building? And that's why they go all the way up to,
So you're saying
Yippee-ki-yay,
go out
Texas.
where people don't care?
Well,
Because everything is new and
well,
there's no history.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we also have to see that we could also be a part of why they're not building towards us and going that way. They're going to build and they want to make money. At the end of the day, they want to make money. And if we make it harder for them, which what ultimately we all aspire for is more dense, single, urban village style housing coming this way rather than to continue to build out toward Buc-ee's. But obviously, when you ask them, they're like, it's easier for us to build out towards Buc-ee than deal with the people who want to have a conversation about the building. But it's bad for cities because we don't have the taxes to help them build roads and lights and whatever else we got to build out there. And so I just think, like, we got to see that we got to make it more.
I agree with you about making
friendly,
it easier to develop in the urban core where all that stuff already exists. And like you said, there are people in neighborhoods around here who don't want that growth to happen here either. Fort Worth seems to have a very, like, I'm here now, let's just roll up the roads and put a wall around us and not let anybody else move here. It seems to be the answer to almost every article that you see on social media about something changing or being built or being proposed is no.
Yeah.
And that's what causes people to just go out where it's green space and there's not a core group of people having a hot take on what somebody wants to do.
Yeah. No, I agree. We can talk a lot more about this. Maybe we should get some experts in here to talk with us about it, who knows some of this data. But we got a big story to get to. And I actually am really excited about this big story because you are actually in the action of this big story. And so
I was in the room where it happened.
Yes. And so there has been a lot of talks, and we have kept our drama and tea down to a low here on the 817 pod, but there's been tons of conversations. Is Mayor Mattie Parker going to run for re-election in 2025? There's been a lot of discussions around that. Is she getting tired of it? She has a growing family. She has her own family needs. All the things that it takes to be a mayor and in Purple City is real hard, with especially what's going on. We talked about Tarrant GOP having to deal with them attacking her. Then also us, the progressives, being like, hey, she's not doing enough to see where this city is going, this youthful, young, minority city. Does she see it? Can she captivate it? So there's so much up against her running. And so in a meeting that you're in, tell us what happened. Tell us the game plan, what happened, and where do we go from here?
I'm a member of the Women's Policy Forum here in Fort Worth, and every month we have meetings where we talk about policies that affect women, basically, and we have speakers come and panels and all that kind of stuff. So at the meeting last week, we had Mayor Mattie Parker and all of the female council members that are currently serving Fort Worth City. And we did this last year as well, same group. And so Gina Bivens has made it very clear that she's not running again. We had a lot of conversations about the challenges and the difficulties of being in an elected office. And to your point about why would people want to do this? And is somebody going to do it again after being put through the ringer of what they've been having to face over the last 2 years? And during that meeting, someone, and I regret that I didn't turn around and look to see who asked the question, but somebody in the audience at the end of the panel discussion asked the question. We all know that Gina's not running again, but the rest of you, what are your plans? Because this election is in May of next year. And while the filing deadline doesn't open up until January, I believe, you can't just spin up an election between January and May. So there's got to be people thinking about what their plans are and making plans about what they're going to do happening now. And so the question was asked of the rest of you, who's going to run again in 2025? And all of them besides Gina, raised their hands. But because I was looking at the panel to quickly make sure I caught who raised their hands and who didn't, I didn't see who asked the question. So I can't go to them and find out. But I immediately, because we've been speculating and everybody's been asking us too if we know, and I have heard from some people, oh, Mattie is absolutely not running again. I've heard from other people, oh, she's absolutely running again. But I'd not heard anything from her, and so I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in those speculations until I hear it from her. And I thought that raised hand was hearing it from her. On August 15th, the Star-Telegram published a story. Does a raised hand mean Fort Worth Mayor Mattie Parker is running for re-election in 2025? And they basically reached out and said that after council members Jeanette Martinez, Macy Hill, Elizabeth Beck, and Gina Bivens participated in this panel, and all of them besides Gina raised their hand, including the mayor. Somebody tweeted, "Alert, news alert, Mattie Parker will run again." But a spokesperson for the mayor quickly poured cold water on the apparent announcement, saying in a text message to the Star-Telegram that a raised hand was to avoid speculation Parker wouldn't be running again. So we're right back where we started.
Yeah, the quote is, people can continue to speculate, but the mayor hasn't made a decision. Kind of giving you context there, right? I mean, you're right. We have been back and forth. I mean, the amount of people we heard who would run if Mattie didn't run. But we also think like this is a very fragile time to be waiting so long for us to be clear on what Fort Worth is going to do. Because we talk about how clear the Texas GOP is on who and what they want to do to the county and to the city. And so we need someone who wants to lead that and be able to protect Fort Worth values and what we do and the opportunity we have here in Fort Worth. And so, yeah, I've been kind of nervous here. And to me, if I'm being honest, like, I hope Mattie Parker's hand was serious, because to me, I think we need stability. We need consistency. I guess what's fear for me right now is that, does she really want it if it's this inconsistent? Like, you also want someone who wants it, you know, who's hungry for it, who has a vision for the city, who's going to get people excited. And it hasn't felt that way. I mean, we've had so much going on in the news from all the things the county's doing. There's no accountability or anyone saying, hey, this is inappropriate. The proclamation stuff, there's been so much stuff happening. And so we also have a very silent group of people who are not standing up or talking about values today. So do I want the same of what we have today? I don't necessarily know, but I think why I'm much more a proponent of keeping Mattie and the behaviors we have today over who gets that seat if it's not Mattie. I don't think the Democratic Party has a candidate, has a strategy, has a campaign of having a chance to compete if that happened. And I'm afraid that the people who would run for that seat, you know, if Mattie didn't run and if Steve Panate didn't run, Brian Byrd would be our mayor today, most likely.
You're talking about the last election.
The last election. So it's like, and I don't want to go that way. So this is why this is so important for us to be really watching what happens over the next few months here. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's a lot of people planning what's happening if Mattie is not going to be our mayor anymore.
I mean, to your point, the thing that resonates with me the most is having people in those seats that want to be there and that have a strong passion for our city. And that's a challenging thing to find these days because of how negative being in those seats can be, and the things that they have to face and the personal attacks that they have to take on. And, you know, I've heard several people talk about a pipeline of folks that would be interested in doing these things, and people who have served on boards and commissions and been involved in their communities and come at this from a perspective of understanding and being involved and knowing what it takes versus being pissed off about one issue that flared up and got them so mad that they decided they're going to run for council. Because I think those kind of candidates are candidates that don't see the bigger picture and are not trying to be there to represent all of the people. Those are people who have hot button issues that are specific to them and agendas that they're trying to carry out. And I don't think that those are the best leaders. But I think it's really important that we have folks that want to do and serve. And one of the discussion topics at that luncheon also centered around the fact that every single one of the council members now has a job besides being an elected official. And the fact that we don't pay our council members enough for it to be their full-time job. And so literally this council is not able to put in full-time hours. And they're getting criticized for that too. They're getting criticized for not showing up for different things. And you don't know what it is that they're dealing with in their daily lives, just like any other human being. And I'm constantly running into people who don't understand or don't believe or question whether elected officials are like the rest of us, regular human beings that have lives, and giving people some grace in that. Because, I'm not going to point to specific examples because it'll be calling out certain people about things that they've said. But it annoys me that people just assume the worst in politicians, quote unquote, that they're in it to get rich and all these different things that people are throwing around out on social media that make it something that people literally don't want to do. I get asked on the regular whether I would run for office again. And at this moment, that's not really something I'm interested in doing because it's a lot of heartache and heartburn and negativity. And I don't know if I'm able to get things done the way that I would like to get them done.
Yeah. And speaking of the job piece, a part of what really started the conversation is Mattie going to rerun was when in June 2023, Mattie took a part-time position as a chief of staff for Cook's Children's healthcare system. And I think a lot of people are like, man, that's not a part-time. A chief of staff can't really do their job part-time. A chief of staff, you're the lead of full-time staff, yet you're part-time. It doesn't work with the title. And the kind of compensation she's getting, getting there, the kind of, talks of what's the plan with her leadership involved. And so to me, that's what really is making this like, I'm wondering if her employer, Cook's Children, has some type of strategy or plan of what it looks like if they're going to support her as she runs, right? And then was there a plan, or even was there a discussion that this was a decision she could have already made, and there was a plan and a discussion, but with this employer about what's her life after being a mayor.
The hand raise was pointed to as being something to keep people from speculating that she won't run, and here we are speculating about all the things.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't think that cleared it up.
Yeah, and so the other people who were part of this forum, obviously, Jeanette Martinez, Elizabeth Beck, Macy Hill, the other three, and who are going to continue to run. I haven't heard of any real competition or announcements for the Gina Bivens seat.
No, there's like 6 people running, I think.
That you know of?
I don't know of all 6, but I've heard it's going to be
they're starting to come.
Expletive show.
That's perfect because this is what the Heat 17 pod is all about. So I'm excited to see what happens there. And I'm glad you.
When there's an open seat, there's going to be a lot of people running. That is always the case. When I ran in 2014, there were 6 people that ran for that open seat. When I ran for mayor in 2021 and District 9 was an open seat, there were 9 people running for that seat. So there'll be a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, which is great because District 5 is an important part of the Fort Worth, and that's a place that needs a vision. And so we're excited to see what that looks like then. So now we're going to go ahead and move into wins and losses. We start with our losses and end with a win. I'm going to start us off because I like having Ann finish off with her win, and then we move into the close. And so my loss, right after, again, last time we recorded, it was Wednesday and it came out Monday. But during that time, we lost 2 lives here kind of in the Fort Worth area. And one was a CrossFit competitor who was 28 years old, Lazar Dukic, and was a CrossFit athlete from Serbia, and died after drowning in the Marine Creek Lake on August 8th. I know we constantly talk about getting sports and getting events and getting people here, and CrossFit is a massive upcoming community and culture, and they filled up Dickies Arena to have their event. And for Fort Worth to be that partner was a huge thing for us. And so to see this incident happen and us be in the news for this, and we just hope Lazar's family and the CrossFit community is able to persevere through this as they continue to move their special community forward. The other person is Sergeant Billy Randolph, who has been a long-time Fort Worth police officer and has spent decades working here, and has also there was a drunk driver car incident hit him while he was responding to an 18-wheeler crash that was also on fire. And so just wanted to acknowledge that, these were people doing their job, doing the thing that, that they cared about. And, Fort Worth, they lost their life here. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. And what is your loss?
So my loss feels like a death, but it is not a death. Definitely not as extreme as those and unfortunate things that have happened. But we are losing someone at the city of Fort Worth in their official capacity. And I'm glad to hear that he has plans to stay involved in the community. But longtime Fort Worth Assistant City Manager Fernando Costa is retiring. And he has just been an incredible asset to the city. As he's been the head of the planning department in the past, that's what he was brought in to do. He has been tasked with many of the challenging and hard conversations and decision-making that has occurred in the city. I've had the privilege of working alongside him on a number of things. And I just think that it's an incredible loss of institutional knowledge and passion and love for this city in that capacity at the city assistant city manager level. And my understanding is that they're not planning to fill his role with another assistant city manager. There's quite a few of them up there now, I think 5, so we'll be back maybe down to 4. But I'm hoping, as the article about this talks about, that he has plans to stay involved, and I plan to make sure that he stays involved because he's an important person in our community, and we have a lot to be grateful for the service of all the years that he served in that role.
Absolutely. Now moving into the wins category, my win is the Tarrant County College Opportunity Center floor. They have just launched a new high school that's not for youth, but for people between 18 and 50. New Heights is the first of its kind in Texas. When the Senate Bill 2032 passed in spring 2023, it allowed entities to create agreements between nonprofits, community colleges, and adult charter schools. The partnership included a number of local businesses and leaders, but New Heights is basically allowing people to go and get their diploma, and it's at no cost to the people who want to go back to school. And so the New Heights Adult High School is across the street from Dunbar High at 5901 Fitzhugh Ave. It's prepared to take students from all walks of life. And I think, when you look at the migration patterns of people here in Texas who come to Texas to have a new life, to want to develop and get better for themselves, we talk about what we need as an economy for people who are credentialed and ready to be able to work jobs that are coming to Texas. I think this is a creative way to solve a need, and I think adult education is going to be more and more important regardless how many graduations or degrees you have in a world that's constantly changing. So shout out to the New Heights for being here.
So my wins are 2 wins, and they are city planning focused, which will come as no surprise to anyone. Fort Worth announces a new historic Southside developer after months of uncertainty. So the Evans-Rosedale Urban Village had a developer that was tasked with the redevelopment of that, and that kind of stalled out, and that developer was let go, and now we have a new developer online. And then there was a second article talking about West Berry Street, that it's time to start changing it up. West Berry Street businesses are eager for TCU development. So there's some property in that West Berry corridor that is predominantly owned by TCU, and they've got some serious plans. As a planner, what both of these areas have in common is that years ago, there was intentional planning that was put in place with community input and engagement when those urban villages were established. And what both of those areas are continuing to do is move forward with actual development now that that's something that's economically feasible and pencils out in a community engaged fashion. So I think that those are both wins. I think there are things that we should look to as the city does any kind of planning and development for this community, whether it be the comprehensive plan, whether it be Move 1 Million with the transportation plan, all of that, having that more community focus and getting the input from the community that is surrounding it as to what serves everyone instead of just marching forward with your ideas of what could be good. So those things I think are both wins.
I love that. Great. Well, here was another episode of the 817 podcast. Really excited to keep on engaging you all and keeping you guys connected. Next week, we will not be having a pod, and we will have the Doc Bookshop with us as they're going to tell their story and talk about an upcoming event that it feels like a must attend. And so I'm really excited for you guys to hear that while we're out on the August 26th date. So be on the lookout for that interview. And yeah, we'll keep you updated on what's going on this show.
Dopamine swipe, follow us like double tap.